Technology Insight on AMEInfo. On this occasion we'll look at BYOD, which is bring your own devices like tablets into an enterprise, into the network. So Florian, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
What's the impact of people bringing devices into an environment? But before we look at that, how is the landscape changing? Are enterprises allowing more and more personal use of devices?
Sure. I mean, bring YOD is actually, that means bring your own device. It's probably the second wave of what we call the consumerization of IT. And the first wave was enterprise organization looking at embracing, Web 2.0, social media. So that was seen as the first wave. And obviously, bring YOD is driven again by the consumerization of IT. That means employees at the first place are consumer.
Sure.
And of course, with, if you look at the various statistics of how many smartphones have been sold in 2011, I think it's about 472 million. This number is predicted to grow very, very fast. And as well, as you mentioned earlier on, the growth of tablets,
sure,
it's amazing. So IT organization have to face the bring YOD. They don't have the choice anymore. So what that means is they have to embrace it.
So at one time, not that many years ago, there was no choice for the employees. You were supplied perhaps with, we'll say, Nokia communicator. I mean, that seemed to be the favorite at the time. And it was all done, back office, connectivity, the whole lot.
Yeah, sure. I mean, what's happening today is, of course, organization can still manage mobile devices. At the time being the Nokia, or some of them starting with the Apple smartphones and so on and so forth. But the reality is, people want to use their own device. And obviously there are some benefits. People know the device, they're happy, they are more productive. That means that there probably be a higher staff retention.
Sure.
If you look at the benefit as an organization, they can offset some costs. Of course, as always, with benefits come some challenges.
So that's what we've got to focus on. And what are those main challenges for an IT department?
Yeah, so there's a couple of challenges they need to basically to resolve together with the vendors. The first one is everything around, I would say, data leakage protection. What's happening if the personal device gets lost or stolen or broken? That needs to be secured. And a good way of starting, I would say, for an organization to put into place a bring your own device policy is simply answering 4 questions.
Okay.
And it's the 4 W's. Who? Where?
Yeah.
When? And what? Very simple. Who? The users.
Yep.
What? The applications. What type of device are actually allowed onto the network? Where? I'm allowing access from Wi-Fi, 3G network, 4G networks, and so on and so forth. And of course, when? During business hours, after business hours, before business hours. And if they start putting into place a policy around these 4 W's, then they will probably overcome most of the challenges. Another thing they need definitely to take into account is they need to think about support.
But before we get onto the support, what about the aspects of the 4 W's? What sort of things are key to the 4 W's?
Yeah, I mean, the aspect is definitely putting into place, starting on a white piece of paper and say, okay, looking at all the various scenarios, the devices that are likely to be connecting to the network from a remote location, what type of users, is it sales, is it marketing, finance, production, and so on and so forth, what are actually the key applications they actually really need to access from these devices, and then doing authentication. So not only authenticating the user, but there's ways to actually authenticate the device and basically say, yeah, this is a trusted device,
Sure.
I will allow access.
So once that's been established, what is the next step for the IT regarding bring your own devices?
So the next step for IT is to really, because obviously there's the technological element, security, mobile device management solution, and so forth. But then at the end of the day, who is using these devices? Users. So there's the human factor. So I think there's a bit of training that needs to be done by IT about not only the benefits, but the potential risk. Because at the end of the day, you can have the best security solution in place if you actually don't educate your users and define specific limits in terms of what they can or can't do, then you will always end up into troubles.
So what is the biggest area of risk? Is it employees losing their device, or is it hacking?
Actually, there is a bit of both. I mean, obviously, you can use the device, you can, forget it on the taxi, on the plane, on the train, and so on and so forth. Of course, if you look at the hacking side of the business, hackers go where you have the highest number of users. Today, there's what, 472 million potential smartphone users.
Yeah.
Tablets is the same. Obviously, we've seen recently attacks, especially targeting the Android operating system. Of course, there's some attacks targeting iPads and iPhones.
Sure.
So of course, there's a risk of hackers hacking the device who then connect back to the network. So there's ways of preventing that, and one of them is using an SSL VPN gateway, because by using an SSL VPN gateway, you actually encrypted the communication from the device onto the network, and then as well the firewall, if you are implementing a next generation firewall, is able to basically read the SSL encrypted traffic and block any potential threats or any potential hackers going through that tunnel to get into the network.
So Florian, two very key elements there by the sound of it. And now coming on to operating systems, I mean, we hear a lot about Android being perhaps not so secure as iOS, but is that really true, or is it a misconception?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of misconception, to be honest. I mean, yeah, in the early days, because the way Android has been designed, it's more of an open platform. But now, if you look at the application being posted onto the Android site for users to download and then use, they've gone through a very tough process in terms of making sure there's no issues, and so does Apple actually. So actually, the risk when it comes, the interesting thing is when it comes down to bring your own device, there's more risks coming from laptops, Windows laptops, Linux laptops, or even Mac, because the users have the admin right. So that means they can download anything they want without IT knowing about it. So if you are allowing employees to come from a laptop, you have to do more checks on the laptop that you would need to do from a smartphone or a tablet.
So on that note, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us here on AMEInfo.
Thank you very much for your time.